Hello and welcome to another interview in the Time4Advice digital transformation video series. Over the course of this series, we'll be interviewing industry figures to see what they understand by digital transformation and how they see it impacting financial advice and wealth management businesses. Our guests will include industry pundits and practitioners. All will have their own views, and we hope that you'll find them interesting and informative. As a provider of technology solutions to financial advisors, we've no doubt about the value digital transformation can deliver a business, not only in increased profits, but also in long-term sustainability. Too few people have access to professional advice, simply because the current model is overly expensive due to disconnected systems and multiple manual workarounds, which diverts time away from client relationship management onto mundane tasks like review report writing that clients simply don't value. At Time4Advice, we want to change all that. We're already hearing from clients that are well on their way to digitally transforming their businesses. One of our clients recently announced that his firm was servicing some 2,500 clients per advisor. That's 10 times the average. It's important to remember that digital transformation is a journey, and all firms will be at different stages of that journey. Some well advanced, others just starting. There's no doubt that it's challenging, but we believe that firms need to think big, start small, but just start. Today, I'm happy to welcome Chris Baigent-Reed, owner of Jigsaw Tree, to share her views about digital transformation and what she believes it means to the financial services industry. Hi Chris, and welcome.
Hi Roland.
So Chris, firstly, it's great to see you. So thanks for coming down here in these very strange times. What do you understand by digital transformation and how do people get going?
Well, it's a really interesting one, and I think it can be interpreted many ways by many firms. I think sometimes firms have quite a narrow view on what digital transformation actually means, but there are a number of core components. So we all start with data. So you have to make sure that the data gives the users what they need in order to be able to analyse, understand and make use of the data, but also have confidence in what that data tells them and what changes they can make to the business as a result. And then we also look at how that business can innovate change within it so that it can scale. And in order to do that, we start looking at their processes to say, well, how effective are their processes? Are there any areas where there are inefficiencies and changes that they need to make in order to build best practice within the technology? And the technology is key in order to make sure that they adopt it appropriately. And what's important here is the flexibility of the configuration services that technology enables that business to build. And then really it's over to the adoption of that technology and how well it's embedded within that advice firm.
So obviously Jigsaw Tree specialises in helping firms make more from their business, and digital transformation must be a recurring theme for you. So how do your clients get value? How do they start working with Jigsaw Tree to begin this journey?
Yeah, so for any advice firm that we work with, we always believe in the philosophy from good old Stephen Covey, so start with the end in mind. And seek first to understand. So the first thing we will always do is look at their data. Data just presents us with the facts, and from there we look at data and configuration and combine those two with the business objectives to make sure that that firm gets a really good outcome. And what we tend to do, it's quite subjective, we RAG rate key areas of configuration to say, well, look, here's the areas that you're using really well, and here's some areas where you may have opportunity to make improvements within your business. And so far, we've always managed to find that we can enhance the way that that firm operates.
You make a really important point, and that's about the data. And so when you come into a firm, how do you find most firms are when it comes to the management of their data?
I would say that most firms don't necessarily have a clear strategy around their data and what they do with their data and how they reuse their data. We went into one advice firm and they were rekeying data, I think it was about 18 times, which is crazy when we work in a space with lots of great technology, APIs, so you can hook different technologies in, so you can follow that advice journey through and make sure that the clients get better outcomes with better consistency and accuracy. So what we tend to find is that there is huge variances in terms of the types of data that's recorded, certainly the accuracy, and what that leads to is firms not being confident with the data that they have in their CRM.
And why do you think firms are in this place?
I think most firms have been operating for quite a long time in the sector. And I think that brings a level of complexity because they may be on third or even fourth generation technology. And as we know, when technology firms do a data migration, it's never an exact science. And there are always data losses that come through that process. But what we equally find is that firms don't necessarily do enough checking of that data to make sure that, again, they've got that confidence in what's migrated from one technology into the next.
Important. We'll probably come back to that in a few minutes. But in terms of your experience as to how behaviours have changed as a result of lockdown, how are you finding firms are addressing that and how they want to deliver their service to clients? Because obviously most financial advisors, as I'm sure you will have experienced many times, have always been very much focused on delivering face-to-face advice. So clearly the pandemic has addressed that once and for all. So in your experience, how your clients are coping? How are they dealing with it?
Again, I think different firms have tackled this in different ways, but a lot of them have achieved a similar outcome. You know, we found that face-to-face has moved to online. You know, they've had to bring their clients along on that journey. Some have decided that they're going to use things like Teams or Skype or Zoom for that. Others have said, look, we're going to embrace portal technology. So one of our firms started off with a very small number of clients on their client portal. They've now got 10,000 clients on their portal. And that change has happened as a result of lockdown. So some quite significant changes have happened. And some firms have been able to mobilise their workforce really quickly because of the technology they use. Others have really struggled because they may be using older desktop type solutions that don't necessarily help if you're working in a remote environment. And I guess from our perspective, Jigsaw Tree was built on a virtual network basis. So, I have people that work from Bridlington down to sort of Kenilworth, Malvern, and we all work on a remote basis. And again, we can help support firms in that transition.
It's fascinating. So just picking up on that theme just there about portal technology, which is really interesting. The firm's got 10,000 of their clients now on the portal, but how are they actually managing people going to it? Are people actually using it? And if so, what sort of percentages of people what percentage of their clients are actually using the portal on a regular basis? Because one of the key things, I guess, in any new service is encouraging clients to take advantage of it. But especially when it comes to something like digital, which requires them to go and do something, what's in it for them? Why would they do it? And how are firms encouraging them to take that step?
Well, I think that comes about as a whole cultural shift, one within the business, but two, within the services that they provide to the client. And I think this is about visibility and transparency as well, to make sure that clients understand the value that they're getting as a result of implementing that portal. But I think there's also another important question, which is around how much information do they give that client? Because I firmly believe the advice firm should be in control of the information that they feed out to their clients as part of their service proposition. So we've seen that firms will implement it, but they will implement it on the basis that they deliver maybe some fact-find capability, but in addition to that, maybe some documents sharing and storage and maybe some communication tools in there, so that when we think about things like GDPR, you know that that data is going to reach that client in a safe format, in a way that they can understand what's happening. But I also think that there does have to be a support mechanism for the clients, depending on their age and demographic and what they're used to in terms of technology, to make sure that they can maximise those tools. And we're seeing clients, engage more with things like, Teams, and Zoom to make sure that they can keep that communication with family, and it's an extension of that really.
So I'm an IFA firm. I want to improve my business, and I've heard of Jigsaw Tree. So we have a meet. What's your objective when you engage with a firm? What are you trying to achieve for that business? What does good look like for you?
It could be many things, Roland, because we firmly believe that one size doesn't fit all. And therefore we will always talk to the firm about the objectives that it wants to achieve. But generally speaking, we will always start off with assessing their data and configuration. And then we will link that into the business objectives that the firm has to make sure that we have some clear deliverables that we have to meet with that firm. And we review that as part of their project. And we put in place project governance to make sure that, you know, we have regular touch points with them. But generally, it tends to be around how we can help them either to embed, reconfigure, cleanse data, look at outputs, to make sure that all of those things hang together. So we have something called an accelerator service where we would just look at all of those different components, and then a firm can say, right, so against our priorities, these are the elements that we want you to deliver for us. And then for some firms, it may be that they want to use our expertise from an outsourcing perspective. So it could be that either they've had some challenges, some staff changes, or they've got business growth and they want to have a little bit of a buffer. And again, we help fulfill that need for them as well.
Fantastic. So we often hear the word ecosystems mentioned. I mean, what are they and how do they fit with digital transformation?
Well, that's an interesting one, Roland, because you know there is lots of talk around ecosystems, and for me it's really simple. An ecosystem follows the requirements of a business from end to end. So in a financial advice term, it would follow that advice journey from when you first engage with a client through to the service delivery and that review program that the client goes through. But it's also the ability to be able to hook in and integrate different technologies so that you have that straight through processing.
Now, obviously, in my introduction, I was talking about the fact that at the moment there are far too few people served by financial advisors. I think of the 40 million people in the UK that could do with financial advice, IFAs probably look after between 3 and 4 million of them, so less than 10%. And that's largely down to, I think, the inefficiencies that are built into these business processes, which you must see it every day. So how can firms reduce their costs and work more efficiently to serve more people?
And I think that has been a challenge that's been around for a long time, and therefore what we need to look at as a sector who have a responsibility to the end consumers is perhaps how technology can help fill that advice gap. So as part of doing some research into the market on digital transformation, I talked to a friend of mine who works at Wealth Wizards, and they are probably a really good example of a tech disruptor in the market who are looking as to how they can use robotics and artificial intelligence to be able to deliver service which gives that auditability and robustness and transparency, but by automating it. And they can not just deliver quite simple advice, but also quite complex advice through to making sure that the client's been checked in terms of the data that they've provided in the fact find, through to the recommendation, even do fund selection and suitability report, and all of that is audited. But the great thing is it also integrates with CRM solutions through API services, which means that you can integrate the two together to be able to provide more advice to a greater breadth of client.
So is that the beginning of disintermediation of financial advisors? Do you see this as a sort of robo replacement of advice, or is this sort of there to support advisors?
Yeah, definitely not. I think advisors are absolutely crucial to make sure that the end consumers get the right advice. But I think this is a collaboration of using technology and advisors together to make sure that, one, the advisor has the choice as to which is the right outcome for the client, because it may well be that the right outcome is to go down the automated advice, but it may well be that actually it's a blended approach working with the advisor. So the advisor will always determine what is the best outcome for the client.
Well, that has been really interesting, and I've just got one more question to ask you, because you see a lot of stuff, and it's all about the technology in common use, because there have been a number of really white papers, and I suppose the most recent was Langkat's Origo, The Disconnected World, the Advisor's View, talking about, as you've already mentioned, the sort of disconnect between various technologies. And at the heart of a service proposition, you've already mentioned data and access to data, so you've got clarity over what's going in and what the consequence of that is, what the outputs are. And I've got here an iPod. So the iPod was launched by Steve Jobs, as you know, around about 2003, which is when the existing crop of back office systems were just coming to market. So not meaning to be controversial, but how can you hope to digitally transform your business when you're using technology that was built in 2003, where Steve Jobs was launching the iPod, and you just compare how that has really transformed into what we now use with iPhones and iPads and things like that? Technology's moved on massively.
Sure, and I think you're absolutely right, and I think that is a great question. As you know, part of my background is I worked for First, and we delivered Advisor Office, which was and still is a desk-based solution. And I think
it's still in use today.
It is still in use today, you're absolutely right, and continues to have a loyal following of clients. And I think it is almost impossible for firms using that type and age of technology to be able to digitally transform and to gain efficiencies through the integrations that are currently available, because in that solution it's not available because it was written in an old Access database using technology that just isn't supported anymore. So I think for some of the technologies, firms are now talking to us to say, look, we need to look at our technology because we want to make sure that we're aligned with what's happening in the market. We want to digitally transform. We want those efficiencies, and we want to be able to give our clients choice as to how they engage with us. And it's only through using newer, more sophisticated technologies will they be able to do that.
Fantastic. Well, Chris, that has been really, really interesting, and thank you very much for spending the time with us. I hope our viewers find it as fascinating and interesting as I did. So thank you for your time.
Thanks, Roland.
And hopefully, we'll no doubt pick up again in the future. Thank you very much, Chris.